All right, so we're just going to record through this one just so that you can hear this article read aloud and you can follow along either on the screen or with it in front of you. So this is for the Unit Standard 22751 and this article is the seismic shift happening in youth sport. So as you read through, any words that you don't understand you should be highlighting and then building a glossary so that you better understand them. Another thing that's important is to highlight information that you think is key. What I would recommend for that is to read the questions so that once you've done a skim read, you read back through it again and highlight the information that is relevant that's going to help you answer the questions, and they're further down the page. All right. In the hall of an Auckland football club, a heated debate is playing out. Parents and administrators have convened at the behest of one of the dads who has concerns he wants to raise. The man believes his son, by all accounts a talented player, is being held back by the team environment. In particular, he has identified 4 players that just aren't up to scratch and therefore preventing his boy from reaching his potential. The father proposes that these players should be swapped out for 4 players he has scouted from the grade below. He can no longer stand by and watch as his son's development is curtailed by poorly skilled players who are never going to make it, he argues. The most troubling aspect of this story is that his son is 9 years old. The father was so convinced his child was not only destined to be a professional footballer, but that his career was being placed in immediate jeopardy by the apparent lack of pedigree of these 9-year-old hacks, that he was willing to ruin the football experience of 4 kids, potentially souring their view of sport for life. Simon Walters hears stories like this all the time. For more than a decade, Walters, who heads the Coaching, Health and Physical Education Department at Auckland University of Technology, has been researching youth sports, and he has come to a pretty firm conclusion. We've been getting it all wrong. Walter's interest in junior sport was initially sparked by research into sideline behaviour after a spate of concerning incidents hit the headlines around 10 years ago. He found there was indeed a problem. It was not so much the extreme incidents that occurred, the ones we see in the media every few months, like a parent goes over top or a referee gets abused, but rather the undercurrent of behaviour that surrounded youth sport. It is quite intense, it is hyper-competitive, and whilst it was not extreme behaviour, it does not create a positive environment for young people, says Walters. He observed a toxic ecosystem whereby, rather than focusing on the positive physical and social outcomes, junior sport is simply seen as a production line to the elite end. An obsession among parents of ensuring their children were getting on the pathway, coupled with the rise of sports academies, was putting kids under pressure to specialise early in a chosen sport, where they are subjected to heavy training loads. Those that aren't identified as talented fall off the conveyor belt, believing sport isn't for them. The net result is a marked decline in participation rates, overuse injuries increasingly occurring in younger age groups, and teen athletes experiencing depression and burnout, harbouring the backlash. As the 2019 Super Rugby season kicked off, it was the under-13 representative rugby that was the biggest story in town. North Harbour Rugby made international headlines when it announced it was axing the team for the annual Provincial Youth Rugby Tournament, Roller Mills, in favour of a development program open to any kid who wants to take part. It was hailed as a bold and progressive move by the union's leaders, with several high-profile former players, including Buck Shelford and Jeff Wilson, coming out in support of the decision to implement a more experience-led program. But some parents and rugby traditionalists saw it as a backward step. They argued it was further evidence of the dumbing down of sport, and kids need to be exposed to the tough realities of selection and competition from an early age to build character and resilience. In the months since, North Harbour staked its position. Several other unions, including Southland, Otago, Canterbury, Tasman, Wellington, Taranaki, and Auckland, have followed suit in axing under-13 representative teams. The moves from the unions saw the Northern Regional Rugby Council, NRRC, scrap the Roller Mills tournament, announcing in November it will no longer have the representative provisional union-based initiatives below the under-16 age group. While it might have been uncomfortable for those like Gibson who were caught up in the storm of public opinion, for Alex Cheat, Sport NZ's talent development manager, the response to the North Harbour Rugby story was liberating. See how the media reacted, and hearing the conversations, I was amazed. I was expecting a bit more backlash. A lot of articles had a balanced sort of view, and seeing role models like Buck Shelford really helped shape opinion, says Cheat. Don't get me wrong, online polls will still 30% agree, 70% don't, but actually seeing people say, yeah, this is needed, and these are iconic athletes that have followed the same journeys. Buck Shelford is as hard and as competitive as they come, and he is saying this is the right thing. Cheat is part of a team at Sport NZ working to address welfare concerns in youth sport and reverse the declining participation results by spruiking a balance is better approach among sports leaders, coaches and parents. The policy discourages early specialisation and overly competitive structures being put in place too young, rather promoting the idea that youth sport should focus on creating positive experiences for kids. We need to remember why young people participate in sport. It's about fun, the challenge, being part of a team or group, being with friends, and self-improvement. We need to focus on making sure our young people's first sporting experiences meet those needs, that they want to take part, and through that, develop the skills and confidence to remain in sport throughout their life, says Cheat. A review suggests that a more experience-led approach, where the focus is on fun and enjoyment, is not only in the national interest, i.e. fostering a lifelong interest in sport and building a happier, healthier population, but also in self-interest, leading to a more competitive system and better performances on the world stage. The myth of early specialisation. As the popular sporting fable goes, to raise a champion, you've got to start him young. The push to get children on narrowly focused training programs stems from the idea that intense practice is what sets the elites apart from the rest. But while children prodigies fascinate us and garner media attention, they are sporting outliers in every sense. All the international and domestic research points to allowing more time for unstructured play and a chance to try out a wide variety of sporting pursuits provides a better foundation for success. We know from the statistics that very, very few kids will make it to the top, said AUT's Simon Walters. The ones that do are unlikely to come through this pathway that has been sold to them. They're these tough New Zealand kids who have a go at everything, they've played a lot outside, and they've got these multiple skills that can move from one sport to the other. But the parents just buy completely into this idea that you've got to get in there early. Walter says playing a variety of sports helps young people to develop different motor skills, improving their problem-solving abilities and exposes them to different coaching ideas. There's also a strong belief that focusing on development and removing representative structures in younger age groups is anti-competitive. That unless 12-year-olds are trampling over one another to make their under-13 regional rep team, they're not going to develop the cutthroat instincts they need to compete at the elite end. In an athletic leap of logic, some have extrapolated that out even further to suggest that kids won't develop the skills to win at life. But Cheat points out that competition in sport is innate. He says, regardless of the circumstances, if you put 20 kids on a park and throw a ball into a mix, there's going to be competition. I think people are getting confused that there's nothing there. If we take away reps, there is still going to be a program in place for them, and it is going to be even more beneficial as it gets more kids to stay involved and for those of talent to reach their potential later on. Shifting the focus to retaining participants for as long as possible in itself fosters stronger competition, as higher participation numbers means there is the critical mass to strengthen local, regional and national competitions. What is happening far too often, according to Cheat, is from the age of 8 or 9, the sporting experience is being segregated for children through structures like stream teams and academy programs. So, at that age, we're telling one group of kids, you're good, and we're telling the others that they're not. Those kids that are told they're not any good, they're going to think, well, maybe the sport isn't for me, and find something else. Then the ones that are singled out are going to get better coaching, more resources, more opportunities to play. So of course you're going to get better than the others, but that doesn't mean you've got your talent identification right. Rather than saying you can and can't play, clubs need to manage that environment, and that way all kids can still get stretch and growth within the right coaching around them. By narrowing the field of talented kids too early, Cheat says sports could be closing the door on someone who has a greater potential than earlier developers. Everything that we're seeing in the research suggests that the later point of specialisation, the better decisions you'll have about athletes reaching world-class status. Sports will have more accuracy around the identification process, says Chi. Early specialisation has been linked to an alarming spike in the number of sports-related injuries in younger age groups. We're seeing significant overuse injuries caused by these types of behaviour, says Chi. Just pause it there.